Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Ray Thomas, a licensed professional counselor and chief clinical officer at Feelings Found. Ray has been involved with the eating disorder awareness since her college days and now works as a licensed therapist specializing in body image and eating disorders. As one of the co-founders of Feelings Found, Ray wanted to create tools to better demonstrate psychological concepts in a way that makes self-regulating more accessible. Feelings Found now has 4 different types of tools available that are meant to do just that. Ray, thank you for joining me today on Hopeful Conversations. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I read on your website the mission, and I absolutely love
Yeah,
it. We want to connect.
yeah,
Connection gives life its heart and soul. Tell me more.
yeah. That is, when we sat down to create a feeling found, we were thinking a lot about what's most important to us, because that's really how this all started. It was really just tools for ourselves that we were like, yeah, this would be super helpful to have. And the three of us all sat down and really determined that connection is really why. Because when we can't name our emotions, when we can't regulate our own emotions, when we're lost in anxiety or in depression or XYZ, whatever, the connection, we get disconnected. And I think that feels so isolating and so lonely that it ended up just being really clear to us that that was kind of the goal of everything, is really trying to connect and bring people together, but also connect with ourselves. And emotions is a really great way to do that.
I think the reason that resonated so much with me is just that right now we show so many people
Yeah.
disconnected with self and with
Oh my gosh.
others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's rampant right now. I mean, post pandemic, but then also just with, social media and technology and all of that. I think we're really disconnected right now from other humans. It's unfortunate.
And you also talk on your website about being understood and understanding and being understood.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's the thing that feels best, right? Like when you go to sit in a conversation with someone and you say like, "Oh, I had such a rough week. Like, my, teacher said XYZ and really made me frustrated." And your friend says, "I totally get you." Man, there's just something that feels immediately like a verbal hug about that statement of like, yeah, I understand, I get you. Um, and then for ourselves, having understanding of what's going on with us, why are these emotions coming up? Why is this happening? Where is this coming from? Clarity can be a really incredible tool, especially against anxiety.
And then also the dance of empathy and vulnerability. That one very much resonated with me as a loss survivor. I just feel like
Yeah.
being able to carry more than one emotion at the same time.
Oh, yeah. I love thinking about bittersweet with this, with being able to carry two things at once. There's actually some new research. I just read an article the other day that came out that there's a biological mechanism happening in our brains that shows you can feel two different emotions at one time. It like shows bitter emotion and sweet emotion is really cool. Anywho, I'm getting sidetracked.
No, that's okay.
um,
Opposing emotions at the same time.
Yeah. Then empathy and vulnerability. I mean, our, Queen Brene Brown says it best that, vulnerability is everything. The way to connection is through vulnerability. And I think, again, I think we forget oftentimes about ourselves though, because just because you are inside yourself doesn't mean you're being vulnerable with yourself, right? Vulnerable can mean like facing hard truths and facing hard emotions and things like that. And I think that's another really big piece.
Okay, so take us into feelings found and
Yeah.
maybe explain like just the basis for somebody that hasn't isn't familiar.
Yeah, totally. So, feelings found, we are all about creating tangible tools, so things you can actually hold in your hand that promote emotional curiosity, right? So, kind of this idea of taking all these really abstract concepts, vulnerability, empathy, emotions, like calm down is like very abstract, right? And taking them into something that's much more easily digestible, something that you can look at and in a time of distress and you're not having to come up with the answers yourself. That's really the entire goal. From the feelings wheel to the needs wheel, it's all about giving you a tool that you don't have to be in this alone and you've got some options right in front of you. So that's really the big thing. And we started out really specific to eating disorder recovery, and then we were like, hold on, this is like literally for everyone. Everyone has emotions. That's kind of one of our favorite sayings is you if you have feelings, then this is for you. And everyone has feelings. So it works.
So a tangible tool that one can hold. I
Hmm.
have the feelings wheel actually in my hand
Yeah.
right now, but most of our people are just listening. So, like, can you explain the feelings wheel if a person had the opportunity to hold it in
Yeah.
their hand, what it might be like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I have mine right next to me too, because I find it easier to describe when I'm holding it myself. So it's in the shape of a little bit of a teardrop, and it is connected. There's about, I think, six different petals that we like to call them, and they're connected on the bottom so that they can fan out to create a whole circle of sorts. And then on one side, we've got directions on how to use it that are, pretty large of size and clear to read. And then on the other side, each different petal represents a base emotion. So they're kind of these bigger categories or umbrellas, as you will, of different emotions. So happy, uneasy, stressed, sad, angry, or anxious. And then beyond that, there then are these rays that come out of different, more specific emotions that would fit under that category. So, under happy, for example, some more specific ones might be empowered or loved or trusting. And then off of that little sun ray, there are two more sun rays that get even more specific. So, let's say you're feeling empowered. If we dig even deeper, you might be feeling capable or confident. And the whole goal is to really just get more specific about what you are feeling because, like, yeah, you can say you're feeling happy, but that's a big range of emotions. And we don't actually find that it's that helpful to just name such a big category because then what do you do with it? How can others help you if it's an emotion that you are needing support with? If it's just sad, that gives us a lot of options, whereas narrowing it down gives us a more clear path of where we need to go with it.
Do most people use the wheel individually, or is it something that people use in like a therapeutic setting? Is it something that we use to teach younger children to start naming emotions at a more micro level, or is it all of those different things?
I vote D, all of the above. Yeah, for sure. We see this being used for sure. I mean, I'm a therapist myself and I have it in every session that I do. Huge. Such a game changer to be able to have my clients have something right there in front of them where they can get more specific. And then use it individually as well. I notice that I use it when I'm in times of really high distress and I can't quite figure out what's going on. I find that the feelings wheel is really helpful. Um, it's almost like a mini therapist check-in for myself, of a mini little check-in of how am I doing, what's going on. And then as well for kids, yes. So another one of our goals is making feelings a dinner table conversation, and we're hoping
I
that the
like
feelings
that.
wheel, yeah, the feeling, right? Can you imagine like if we had grown up with feelings being a dinner table conversation, like just
No.
how, like it would be so different, right? So many
I
things.
I've actually thought of that like growing up when I was researching for today, and I was like, okay, I know Ray is younger than myself. I'm 51, and like social emotional learning when I was in elementary school or middle school, it was always about the other person's feelings. Like you're going to hurt their
Oh,
feelings. It was
oh,
never about mine. Is that generational to me?
oh. I gotta think on that. I think because for myself, I don't remember any social emotional learning happening in school, right? But I do think there has always been a bigger focus. I think it's shifting just now, but a bigger focus on others' emotions and, probably more about how to deal with conflict than how to deal with emotions. But
Not the same
then
thing.
not the same thing, like at all. Very interrelated, incredibly so. But yeah, definitely not the same thing. And I think as I sit and think and like sit with that, totally. I think that when even we're talking about teaching people to deal with conflict, it is how do you navigate the situation so that they feel comfortable, they feel okay, you resolve it, which like conflict also doesn't always have a resolution. Like heads up. um, so it's really interesting to think about for sure.
Let's get back to that dinner table conversation
Yeah,
that we want happening today in
yeah,
2024, regardless if that's I'm a mother and I have an
yeah.
8 year old, or I have a teenager, or it's just for adults, humans. Like, how do we talk about feelings with one another?
Yeah, it's really hard because a lot of us didn't grow up that way. And a lot of times, because emotions are so scary, we end up getting really uncomfortable around emotions. And so then the kids in our lives can feel that often. And then they will, tamper away or kind of put away their own emotions. And the risk of that is having yourself or someone going through some really heavy stuff and not feeling like they can talk to anyone about it. I mean, right? I mean, that's a huge part of what y'all do, um, is being open and being able to talk to somebody about what's going on. And if we bring emotions into the dinner table, make it as common of a conversation as what did you learn at school today? Then there is that space where it doesn't have to feel like such a scary thing to say, man, I am struggling right now. I be whatever that might be. I'm struggling with feeling left out at school, or I'm struggling with how my body looks because I'm going through puberty and my body's changing and it's weird. Um, and hey, mom and dad, you've been fighting a lot, or, mom and mom and whatever, like you've been fighting a lot. And I'm feeling really uncomfortable about that. Like, just to be able to make a space where that is the norm. It is not scary. It is not vulnerable. It's just, yeah, this is what I'm feeling. And we're hoping by having, again, this like very tangible tool that is out on the dinner table at all times, it'll just naturally come up. And even initiating, I mean, we do this at events when we do end up hosting or we're invited. We always have people start in with checking in on what they're feeling because everyone's coming in with a different vibe and just how beautiful to be able to share that. So, yeah, that's the dinner table idea.
I like it. I dinner table. So many things happen through conversation and just curiosity and staying open and that
Yeah.
vulnerability piece. Um,
Hmm.
but sadly, we have a lot of distractors to deep
Yeah.
conversation. Not deep. That's not even the right word. We're just conversations. There's so many
Yeah.
distractions today.
Yeah.
So I like this real tool, this
Yeah.
visual thing that you could keep on
Yes.
your dinner table.
Right.
I saw another. Let's go into the other
Yeah.
wheels before I go to. I saw
Yeah.
something else on your website that very much piqued my interest as well. But
Okay.
so we have the feelings wheel,
Hmm.
the body sensations wheel. Tell
Yep.
us about that one?
Yeah, body sensations. We also, sometimes it can be a lot easier to name what you're experiencing in your body
Mm,
first rather than naming emotions, right? So sometimes it can be like I have no idea what I'm feeling, but what I do know is that my chest feels real heavy and I have a headache, and maybe it feels like I can't breathe, or whatever it might be. Or my limbs feel really heavy today. So body sensation wheel basically gives a guide, because there is some really cool research out there about certain body sensations being connected to certain emotions, or kind of a category of emotions. So we basically have just taken that out of a very academic article and translated it into a tool that can help you get there.
I had a lot of body sensations with the very initial stages of grief. My grief traumatized me
Yeah.
very physically, and it was a really,
Oh my gosh.
as an older middle-aged adult, it was
Yeah.
an interesting experience because I hadn't made those connections before. You just kind of, are trudging through life like, oh yeah, I'm tight in the neck, I'm
Hmm.
tight in the shoulders, like
Right.
stress, but the connections. Okay, so
Yeah.
the needs wheel.
Yeah. This one's well, I say it's my favorite, but I'm biased. They're all my favorite. Needs wheel, basically to help you answer the question, what do you need? Because how many times a day or in a week does somebody ask you that? And you're like, hi,
I don't
I
know.
don't know. Please don't ask me that. That's not helpful. So needs wheel, again, basically about connecting emotions and deducing it down to here's what you might be needing. And then the cool thing about the needs wheel, it is bigger in size to allow for this. There's actual kind of prompts that you can execute either by yourself or with someone, someone in your support system to meet that unmet need that you're experiencing at the time. And that's why it's my favorite, because it's, man, when you're in it and in a challenging spot, it's so hard to think about this is what I need. And so the needs wheel is that guide, is that tool to say, I'm uneasy. What I feel like is missing right now is structure. And here's two options for me to create some structure right now, or whatever it may be.
Huh, cool.
Yeah.
And then the intuitive eating. This is a wheel as
Yeah.
well?
Yes. Yeah. Wheel looks a little different, full circle, and then I don't know how to describe this motion at all. It folds out into a chain of circles. We'll go with that. But the whole premise and the idea about the intuitive eating guide is we know that food can be a struggle for a lot of individuals, especially when it comes to emotions and just in general. Food's weird, especially in our society. And so intuitive eating is all about tuning into your body and listening to hunger cues, learning about the different types of hunger, because, hi, fun fact, there are different types of hunger that exist. And having a guide, again, to help you identify those different spots and figure out what your body might need.
Hmm. This one intrigues me as well as
Yeah.
a 51-year-old female that all of that. But with your eating disorder background,
Mhm.
I was wondering, like, what are some of the statistics surround, like,
Oh,
proportion of our population struggles with like disordered eating? Does that number come off the
yes.
top of your head?
So this number is pretty old. I don't know if this number has been updated. I'm sure it has. It just hasn't looked in a while, but something like 30 million in the US, at the very least, every year.
A lot.
Like a lot.
But we don't live in a society that operates that way.
No. And I would even say, through my time working as a eating disorder professional, I also like to say that I think almost every single person has struggled with disordered eating and body image issues at some point, right? So maybe this hasn't reached a level of clinical significance, air quotes in there, that
Uh-huh.
would diagnose you with an eating disorder, but it is still impacting your life in some way, and your relationship with food in your body is unsettled in some way. I think that truly almost, I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone that hasn't said they've struggled with it at some point in their life.
It seems like a very fair statement.
Yeah. So I think that's important to, when we talk about eating disorders, that's important to talk about. And that's why intuitive eating guide is, really important for everyone, whether you, um, you know, consider yourself having an eating disorder or not, is because there's so many messages that we get around food that it really messes with our relationship with it. And truly our body knows what to do. We just kind of get lost and tend to not listen to it along the way. So the intuitive
Mm-hmm.
eating guide is all about coming back to that.
Hmm. Hmm. Gosh, there's so much to talk about, Ray.
Yeah,
Okay, so
let's
I
do
found this on you. Let's keep going. Research that inspired feelings found. Um, quote, how does that make you feel? Unquote.
it. Yes.
Like that's what we think therapy is, right? How did that make you feel?
Yeah. Yeah. I, I think that is such a stereotype of what therapy often looks like. How did that make you feel? Um, but it is a really important question for us to name how we feel. There's different ways to ask it and different ways to access it, of course. But there's actually a lot of research that shows that simply by naming your emotions, it decreases the activation in the amygdala, which is like this little inner part of your brain, um, in some cases by like 50%. And so the
Wow.
intensity of, a potentially challenging emotion can instantly be decreased just by naming it out loud. So this like very stereotypical, like, how does that make you feel? Therapist question. There's actually some research behind it, as annoying as it is.
50%, that's significant.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So what are some other ways that you can ask that question to somebody that you care about, that you see
Yeah.
is experiencing an emotion that maybe is a lot?
Yeah. I would first, I always am supportive of first just like asking permission to ask questions.
Yeah.
Um,
What does
like
that look like?
hey, do you want to talk more about what's going on? Or do you mind if I ask you about what's going on? Because there might be times that people don't want to talk about it. And we
Mm-hmm.
need to respect those just as much. It means just as much for you to this is a little meta, but like ask about asking than even just asking, because it shows that person that you care, that you
Mm-hmm.
notice, um, and all of that. So I would always start out with, hey, do you want to talk about it? Hey, can I ask you more about it? Hey, I'm wondering what's going on with you. And then go into, um, man, what's that like for you? That's a really good question. Um, how are you noticing that show up for you? How has that impacted you? Um, uh, let's see. What are the other ones? These are things that are so like just I now they just roll off, that thinking about them is also is having to think about an automatic process where I'm like, I've forgotten all of them. um,
These are
yeah,
good examples, great
yeah,
examples.
yeah, yeah.
What about the skill of listening?
Oh, huge. Yeah. Yeah, huge. Hard to do. I actually had a conversation today that uh, was just talking about how to help others. And this individual just really had it in their head that the only way to help another person was to solve their problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really hard, especially when it comes to emotions. You can't solve an emotion. That's that's not that's not a thing. You can support an emotion, you can help an emotion, you can attune to an emotion, you can address it, but you're not going to solve it. Um, and so part of attuning, especially attuning to an emotion, is talking about it. And therefore, if you're that support person, listening, listening about that emotion and what it's like. What is it like to be anxious? What is that like for you? How does that impact your life for anxiety to be such a big part of things? Gosh, what does waking up in the morning look like? And then just listening. Because
Listening.
again, it's that part of being understood. That's really where listening can come in, is by listening we can better understand others, and thus people understand us more and feel more understood.
Hmm. I like that about the person felt like they needed to solve someone's problem. I feel
Yeah.
like from what I've learned from being in this space for almost 6 years is that most of the time person does just want to be understood. They don't
Uh-huh.
want you to solve their problem.
No.
They they are trying to understand the problem themselves.
Yeah.
Talking about it helps with that process, naming
Hmm.
it. But I mean, especially a teenager, teenagers don't want their problems solved.
Oh,
They want to solve them themselves. What
yeah.
creates the most opportunity for growth and ownership? Like, I can solve my own problems. I don't need you to
Yeah.
do this for me. Just
Yeah.
listen to me through this process so I can think about the steps that I might take or what might work, might
Yeah.
what not work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Emotional curiosity. How does one stay curious?
Yeah.
Use
Oh, it's hard.
You had a lot of
I
good examples.
um yeah, curiosity in general, I think it's hard.
Why is it hard?
I think it's I little bit of like a hot take here, but I think that technology, love-hate relationship with technology. I'm just going to come out and say it right now.
Absolutely. We
Like
all have a love hate with
some
it.
beautiful, incredible things, then some things I'm like, meh, no, thank you. Um, but I think that our instant access to knowledge
Mhm.
um, has, yes, we can be curious and answer that question really quickly. However, if we can't answer that question really quickly, do we really spend time trying to figure it out? How curious do we remain when we can't answer a question very quickly? When, Google started doing the AI summaries of results, and you don't even have to click into an article anymore. It'll just tell you the answer right away. And I think, unfortunately, it's cool in a lot of ways. We can access knowledge really quickly, but we're not spending the time of what it's like to search for it and have a prolonged curiosity of it. And especially when it comes to getting curious about ourselves, our inner worlds, and our emotions. Hi, Google AI ain't going to tell you nothing.
No,
um,
no.
it's got nothing for you, and it is hard. It takes effort to remain curious because it might not come right away. So I think it's just created this barrier of remaining curious when it's hard. Maybe that's exactly what I mean, actually, is not that it's harder to be curious, it's harder to be curious when it is challenging to do so. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this is my opinion, but
Yeah.
staying curious without judgment.
Mm.
Because when you're trying to listen to someone, and if it's an
Yeah.
uncomfortable feeling, emotion, experience, eating, need, fill in the blank, I want to be able to listen without judging their experience that they're
Yeah.
trying to name.
Yep. So
That's a
hard.
tough one for parents. That's a really tough one for parents
I
or
cannot imagine.
partners. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot. uh, I cannot imagine. I
But
mean,
judgment's the last thing we want as humans.
oh
We
my
don't,
gosh.
that's
No,
why we
it's,
feel disconnected, why we
yeah,
feel alone, why we feel misunderstood.
yeah. Even remaining curious without judging ourselves. That's, I
Ooh.
mean, that's also really hard, really, really hard, because we live in such a world where criticism of ourselves is the way that we get better, high air quotes, for those listening, get better, make progress, air quotes, better, faster, stronger, all air quotes. It's all because we criticize and judge ourselves, which is a lie, by the way. There's actually a
Mm,
ton of research on motivate. I'm a big research nerd if you haven't
I
picked
love
up
it.
on that. But there's a ton of research on motivation that kind of judgment and criticism based motivation is not long lasting and not very effective, literally at all. So I don't know why we continue to use it, but whatever.
How do we break that cycle?
Oh man, spread the word that this isn't actually effective. And then on top of that, continuing to remain really compassionate, even with others, right? Because there is also a way you can be compassionate while also not necessarily accepting. How do I put this into words? Accepting what they've done. So if you've had a conflict with someone or somebody has wronged you in some way, there is a way to remain compassionate towards them while also stating your own feelings, your own boundaries, and your own needs. But we're
Mhm.
not good at that because we don't have it modeled for us, unfortunately. And yeah, my hope is that we can change that. We'll see.
That's good. Compassion. Yeah. Oh, there's so
Um,
much to learn. I love that you mentioned Brene Brown. Like, I
uh,
mean, we're always evolving and always have the opportunity to learn more.
yeah,
Um, life is interesting. Just goodness.
yeah.
What else do we need to know about feelings found? What else do you
Mm,
want our listeners to say? Yes, I of course want to share where we can get the feelings
yeah.
found resources.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Yeah, you can find Feelings Found at feelingsfound.com. And then we're also, for the social media users out there, we are all over social. And if you just type in Feelings Found, you'll see our adorable little green smiley face pop up. We're really happy with our little smiley face.
You do have really cute, the products are cute. They're really
Thank
fun.
you.
I was looking at the values deck. We didn't
Oh,
talk about that.
yes, love.
The recovery journal and the diffusion. Which one of those is like
Yeah.
your favorite?
Probably the values deck. I absolutely love because values is such a big part of the work I do as a therapist is helping people identify their values.
Their personal
And
values.
yep, and especially differentiating that between the values of who your caregivers were growing up and who and society and friends and the environment around you because we
Mm,
all have our own values. And that there's nothing wrong with that, not a single thing. It's really just about embracing them and respecting others' values as well.
yeah.
It's
Oh
really
gosh,
huge.
respect. We're talking some big emotions there, some big
I
feelings.
know. I tend to do that. It's kind of part of the gig.
I think you really, I can tell you're an excellent counselor. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're so
Yeah.
welcome.
I think the
Um,
other thing to know about Feelings Found, we're really big on, we know that not everyone can access therapy and access even some of our tools. We try and keep them affordable, but, you know, such it is that that's not always a thing. And so, we really try and make social media a place that we do have resources on there, that we are putting out journal prompts and questions and spaces to be heard and things like that. So even if engaging with us through, purchasing one of our products isn't feasible, like please come connect with us online. Again, connection is what we really care about, and we really want to build a community rather than building a business. So
awesome. Thank you
come
for
be a
sharing
part.
that.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
feelings found. Okay, Ray, we end every conversation with the same question.
All right.
Are you ready?
Well, maybe. I don't know.
Ray, what does the world need to hear right now?
I just made like a really scrunched face. That's a big question. I think what the world needs to hear right now is that appreciation of someone else does not take away from the appreciation of you. We can all be loved and appreciated. There is more than enough to go around. We do not need to treat love and appreciation like a finite resource.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to remember that one.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Ray Thomas of Feelings Found, for joining me today on Hopeful Conversations. To our listeners, be sure to tune into our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.